What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to another video. Now, if you guys have been paying attention to the channel the last couple weeks, we've been doing arrow builds, we've been doing broadhead testing, all leading up to my Kentucky hunt. And I promised that I would come back and I would give you guys my feedback on my arrow setup and what I decided to use broadhead wise. Now, I will tell you that my Kentucky hunt did not end the way that I had hoped to. I did take a shot on a nice buck, which would have hands down been the biggest buck that I've ever shot to date. But unfortunately, I did not find that deer. Now, I do want to state that I'm not blaming the broadhead. I'm not blaming the arrow setup. I take full responsibility for poor shot placement, but the reality is that things do happen out in the woods. Now, I will dive into the hunt story a little bit, but I want to kind of talk about some of the lessons that I learned throughout that hunt. And let's start with the arrow because it kind of all focuses around this, at least in my opinion. Now, a while back, I did a video where I shared a 418 grain arrow build with you guys, and this is what I had planned to use in the up and coming whitetail season. This year, I went into the season chasing speed and a very high kinetic energy arrow because I wanted something that shot very, very flat. Now, coming out of that hunt, there's a lot that I've learned. There's a lot of research that I've done. And one thing that I overlooked when building this arrow is, like I said, I was laser focused on kinetic energy and I never took into account the momentum. The momentum is really what's going to be needed to drive the arrow through the animal, especially if you happen to hit any type of hard bone. And for me, in my situation, in my experience, that's exactly what happened. The broadhead that I decided to use, and this again was based on all my testing, was the Sever 1.75. Again, I'm not blaming the broadhead. I'm not blaming the arrow. I take full responsibility for the shot placement or the poor shot placement. But keep in mind, when I was hunting, that buck decided to show up towards the tail end of last light. When I drew back, found my anchor, got my peep settled, closed my left eye, I could not see that buck. So I actually opened up my left eye to let more light in so I could see that buck. Now, something that I've learned since then, and I've known this, right? I'm left eye dominant, but I'm a right-handed shooter. I've practiced in low light situations where I squint my left eye and shoot, and I've never experienced any change of my point of impact. However, during that hunt, I did open my left eye completely, and I think what happened is, being that my left eye is the dominant eye, it kind of took over. And again, I've practiced this since the hunt in a controlled environment, and I do unfortunately have the tendency to hit a little bit right, and I do believe that's what happened. Now, there's a lot of assumptions being made because obviously when the arrow hit the animal left. I never saw the animal again, but it's a high probability based on no blood, based on not finding the arrow, that I did square the buck directly in the shoulder, and I don't feel like I had enough weight with this setup to penetrate through that shoulder blade and to get into the cavity, let alone get a pass through. Now, I did search for about an hour that night to try to find blood, never found it. And then I went back the next morning and grid searched for about 4.5, 5 hours, never found my arrow, never found a drop of blood. So it was a very hard lesson learned, and I wish I would have kind of known some of this stuff before, and really I should have listened to what some of the people were telling me. The guys up at Sunrise had advised me not to go with this light of an arrow and to stay within a 450 to 470 range based on my setup. But like I said, I was kind of laser focused on chasing speed this year. So I come out of that hunt and I started to rethink my entire setup, and I built a brand new arrow that I'm going to run going forward this year. I decided to stick with the RIP TKO. I did go with a 300 spine. I went with a 75 grain half out with 125 grain head. So now I have 200 grains up front, which is giving me about 16.7% FOC. Whereas with my light arrow build, I had 150 grains up front, and this arrow was coming in right at about 14% FOC. It might have been even a little bit below that, like high 13s. And what's very interesting about this is if you compare these two arrows in in a kinetic energy calculator, the kinetic energy on this 418 grain arrow versus this 470 grain arrow is very similar, but there is a decent difference in the momentum. There's about a 5% increase in momentum with the 470 grain arrow. So like I said, I'm really hoping that with the increased momentum and the increased arrow weight, that if I do happen to hit hard bone again, that'll be enough to just penetrate into the cavity and increase my chance of success going forward. Now, another thing that I learned and I started to do a lot of research on, and again, I'm not blaming mechanical broadheads for the missed opportunity or the loss of this buck, but some of the data that I saw, which was definitely very interesting and probably the most compelling information that I saw, was put out by Bill over at Iron Will Broadheads, where he took a fixed blade broadhead and measured the amount of force it took to go through hide, meat, and a scapula, and compared it to the top 3 mechanical broadheads that are available on the market today. And fixed blade broadhead, specifically the Iron Will models, took about 30 pounds of force to penetrate through that setup, the hide, the meat, the scapula, versus a mechanical that took anywhere from 160 to 180 pounds of force to penetrate through that same setup. So there's definitely a significant difference, and that's what really resonated with me, and that's what kind of led me to want to try out the Iron Will broadheads. Now, I did go with their wide series, and I went with the double blade. I didn't go with a single bevel. And I'm really hoping that this arrow is going to give me a higher chance of success if I happen to make contact with another shoulder blade on a mature animal like that. Now, obviously, the trade-off is speed, right? Going from 418 grains up to 470 grains, there's definitely a significant speed difference, so much to the point that I actually changed my sight out. I was running the Ultra View sight, which I absolutely love that sight. There's nothing wrong with it, but being that their vertical pins are fixed, I knew that my pin gap was going to be too big, so I did go back to my black gold dual track, which gives me the ability to adjust my second pin and control that pin gap. So now I got my pin gap set at 20 yards and 35 yards, and then I'm able to gap shoot 30. Now, if a deer comes in at 40, I will have to roll because of the arrow drop, but I've never personally shot a buck past probably 35 yards, or a deer past 35 yards for that matter. So hopefully I don't have to run into that situation. But this is going to be what I'm going to be running going forward. I am going to be spending some time tuning this broadhead, but I will say that I was very surprised by the flight of this broadhead with no additional tuning outside of just tuning this new arrow setup with Derek up at Sunrise Archery. This broadhead at 15, 20, 25, and 30 yards hit dead nuts every single time. It almost, I was really surprised because I felt like it was flying like a field point. But again, I just wanted to share my experiences with you guys. I wanted to share the lessons learned. Hopefully it helps you guys going forward. If there's one thing that I would emphasize throughout this whole learning process, is practice in low light situations. It's amazing how it changes everything and how it changes how things look downrange. To be honest with you, when I shoot in low light situations, I can't even see my peep, so it's very hard to even tell how well my peep is actually centered into my scope housing. The only thing that you can do is just trust your anchor point is accurate every single time and get familiar with that, so you know when you do go to anchor that your peep and your scope is lined up perfectly in that situation. But definitely practice in low light, practice with shooting with both eyes wide open, practice with shooting with your opposite eye squinted to see how much light comes in and see how it changes how you're able to see that target. But that's it for this video. Like I said, very, very hard lesson learned, very upsetting. Definitely for me, it was pretty devastating. Like I said, it would have hands down been the biggest buck that I've actually ever taken to date. I'm hoping to possibly get another crack at him later down the road. I will be going back down to Kentucky throughout the year until we hopefully eventually fill our tag. But you know, it was definitely a rough start to the season, but like I said, just wanted to share lessons learned with you guys and just be fully transparent about my experience with the light arrow build. But that's it for this video. I'm very curious to see your guys' feedback, or what your feedback is, or your guys' comments. So please leave them below. Please reach out to me directly if there's anything that you want to say, or if there's any questions that you guys have. As always, I'm always happy to help, and I always appreciate your guys' support. If you guys have not subscribed to the channel, please do so. You guys' support greatly helps us out, keeps us doing what we're doing. And until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We'll see you on the next one.